let's come on then to the timetable for the modifications. Like I say, you've sent me modifications. Are there further modifications to come? If so, timescale.
Thank you, Madam. I think what we've sent you is broadly the discussions that we've had during the sessions.
Yes.
Clearly, there may be other updates which will be broadly to the text, and just ensuring that there's consistency throughout the plan, and any consequential changes as a result of those particular modifications that we probably haven't had time to actually thoroughly go through the plan to check that. So the ones we've sent you so far are the ones that have been debated around this table really in the last 3 weeks or so.
So if we look at the relationship between the 5-year housing land supply, 7 days, would it be possible, I've asked just for a little bit more information on the 600, would it be possible to have that published on Friday, for example? Would that give you enough time to...
Madam, I would certainly want us to aim for that. Clearly, I'm reliant on others within the team to be able to do that, given that we're on Wednesday now. But in principle, we would want to press ahead with that as quickly as possible, because we recognise that that is the initial process that needs to take place.
Yes. So that would be a 7-day working day consultation, and so the main modifications. What would your view be on waiting for the consultation to finish, or do you just want to go ahead with the main modifications, submitting them to me when and if they're ready?
Madam, it feels best in all the circumstances to wait until that initial 7-day consultation process is finished on the 5-year housing land supply issue.
And that would be in case I have any comments that I want to come back on?
Indeed, yes. Okay. And then, plainly, within the context of the comments that have already been raised this morning over the uncertainty of the planning process and the planning policy context, we would want to press ahead with consultation on main modifications as quickly as possible. Madam, if it helps on the housing figures, obviously our retained consultants, GL, know of this issue. They are on standby to reassess the figures as soon as those figures come out. They advise us, because of the circumstances in which we find ourselves within the hearings that are taking place now, that we are a top priority for them in order to do that work. And plainly, we'll only know what that evidence brings forward and how it maps through. But we would hope to be able to resolve that matter very quickly. Okay.
So, do you the main modifications? I think Councillor Powers is right that it would be helpful if we were able to agree a timetable for modifications at least, and then have that published so that we can work towards that. And so, there's some for people who want to look online, etc. There's an indication of when things are going to happen, and so it's probably about 2 weeks' time when you're going to be submitting main modifications. They come in draft form first of all to me, and I just check them through. I look at the mods, the minor ones, the major ones, if there's a crossover. So it's probably 2 to 3 weeks, but we'll work out the date. We'll work out the dates and put the dates on so that people are clear. Dr. Geeson.
Thank you, Madam, particularly for remembering my name. Now we don't have. Just to make a very simple point, there's obviously going to be a lot of stuff published, hopefully on the website. It'd be really good if a way of flagging those up to separate out from everything that is on the website would be good.
Yes, good idea.
And particularly the ones where we're being consulted on, because I mean, in credit to the council, there is a vast amount of information there, and all of us around the table want to see the wood from the trees, and there might be important stuff to read, but there'll be even more tight deadlines on the consultation. I don't know how it could be done, but it would be extremely helpful to everybody. Thank you, Madam.
Yes, normally on the website there would be main modifications. It would have its own separate title, separate way of going in. Scott.
Do we have an alert on the programme
Okay, that's outside my control, but I understand. Yes. Yes. Yes.
And can we have 7 working days, not 7 days, please?
Yes, that's what I said, 7 working days. Yes, not, yes. So we're possibly 2.5 to 3 weeks from the submission of the final submission of the main modifications for consultation. So it is, let's say, we'll have to finalise the timescale, but probably about 9 weeks or so. And I would leave you to look at the sustainability assessment.
I just want to get it clear in my head, and it may be me that's misunderstood. So we're having a 7 working day consultation on the 5-year supply and trajectory.
Yes.
To which point after that, 2 to 3 weeks in the future, we'll have a 6-week consultation period on the main modifications. And we'll then have a subsequent consultation period on the DCLG figures?
The DCLG ones, as soon as they come out, these things are all interlinked, as we know, to do with the policies that we discussed right at the beginning. I think it's just to make the best use of time. If there are further main modifications, they would have to be subject to the same consultation.
So we'll be having potentially concurrent consultations?
We'd have, but on different things.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm just getting it clear in my head. I'm not saying it's right or wrong.
It is possible. The consultations on the DCLG figures and the 5-year housing land supply those people who made representations on those matters specifically will be the only ones who will be consulted on those, because they relate to specific policies and they are the evidence base for specific policies that we spoke about. The main modifications, that is the wide consultation that the council will undertake.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, there is obviously a slight difficulty. There was a degree of disagreement around the table about the way that OAM was calculated by GL, and our consultants particularly had particular issues. And I don't wish to start quoting cases, but there was a recent Warrington appeal decision, which I'm sure you'll be well aware of, which...
You can't reopen the...
I know, but I'm just saying that these issues are likely to come up, and I'm just thinking that all these things are so interrelated that these cross-consultations are going to get confusing and complicated.
Well, we make sure they're not. So there'll be a heading, there'll be a policy, and there'll be specific people who are invited for the DCLG housing figures and the 5-year housing land supply. Very specific consultation. Main modifications will be the main modification consultation, and that will clearly be headed main modification. And the responses specifically to the points that are raised in there.
Thank you, Madam. Just a couple of points, if I may. I may have missed them, in which case my apologies. On the main modifications consultation, is that affected by, the timing of it affected by the Council's pre-election PERDA period? The second thing is that, if I understand correctly, the main modifications consultation is a public consultation, not just a consultation of the people who have been representatives of this exercise, in which case, how will that be publicised for the public, as opposed to things like email alerts to tell people who've been at this?
Yes, I'll have to ask you, Mr. Ashcroft, because it will be your responsibility to do it.
Madam, on that particular point, looking at the general advice that comes from the Planning Inspectorate, we would intend to run that process in a very similar fashion to the last Regulation 19 stage of the plan, where there was information available and for people to comment on that basis. Clearly for local residents it would be significantly different than the earlier stages of the consultation with the exhibitions and the road shows. This is simply inviting comments on the main modifications.
I'm sorry, can I just say the PERDA question?
Well, the PERDA question, that's not for me.
No, Madam, we have looked into that matter, and we are confident that the consultation could go on in the PERDA period, but in any event, on the timetable we've so far looked at, the consultation would start before that period.
Madam Inspector, I'm a bit confused on the PERDA period, how a consultation of this document, because this is a very political document. It was made very, very clear. So I can't see how this consultation can be run through a PERDA period.
Yes.
Well,
I need the consultation to comply with the legislation, and that's what I'm expecting from the council.
So they're saying that they can run it through the PERDA period?
Well, you have to discuss that with them. That's absolutely not to do with me. I need to see that the consultation has taken place and that it complies with the period.
Right. So will it be available other than for elderly people, bearing in mind the lack of broadband and internet connections? How will this be made available to people who do not have broadband and all those other sorts of things? It would be very helpful to know, especially with limited times in libraries and the cut-in, offices available, those sorts of things.
Yes, so this is your statement of community involvement, how you've set out that you're going to consult. And is there anything else you want me to say on that?
Only really to say that we would follow the same guidance and the issues that we tackled at the Regulation 19 stage, that if there was any people who were genuinely felt that they couldn't get access to the modifications, in this case, by the means that we generally made them available, we would do our level best to give them whatever documents, especially printed documents. That system worked very well last time at the Regulation 19 stage. Thank you.
I'll leave it to you about how there's a table of modifications, and that's how they're normally presented in my report. They'll come as a table. In terms of, I think it's Councillor Powers, sorry, I can't quite remember who asked for it, but whether you have those as subtract changes or any other form available. I'm going to leave that with you, but I would just ask you to think about how they're presented. Councillor Powers.
Thank you, Madam Inspector. Yes, the track changes would be extremely welcome. I tracked my own changes between the draft and the pre-submission versions, which took me about 2 weeks, and that's why I'm still working off that. Just to go back to the question of consultations and the election PERDA so-called period. I'm sorry, Madam Inspector, I'm just addressing a point of inconsistency to the Council on this for your information, because the fact of the matter is that neighbourhood planners have been told that they cannot run these consultations across this period, and on that basis I think it would be inconsistent and highly questionable if the Council allowed this one to operate on a different basis.
I don't want that question answered, but what I want is the consultation to comply with the relevant legislation and policy. Councillor Matthews.
I was trying to clarify the issue. As far as PERD is concerned, the council are duty bound legally to follow those rules.
Yes. Okay. Any other points?
You mentioned, and this is relevant to the Western Relief Road, you've made reference throughout this EIP that road would go to a separate public inquiry.
Well, no, not necessarily.
Well,
it needs planning. It has to go through the planning process.
Has to go through the planning process. Right, sorry. I thought you'd mentioned a couple of times that it would go to a public inquiry. I must have made an error on the things. But what concerns me is that the Western Relief Road is a political ambition of one party. It's in their adverts in the local press. And that's again why I'm very concerned about it being consulted when our neighbourhood development plan cannot be consulted in a PERDA period.
I don't want any more questions about the PERDA period. That's nothing. That's to do with the council and how they organise their consultation and what rules apply to the council. What I want is to make sure that the consultations comply with the correct local plan, policy and procedure.
Adam, I promise it's nothing to do with the PERDA period. It's just a technical question that occurs to me. At the beginning you mentioned that the main modifications may be subject to sustainability assessment.
Yes.
Presumably it may also have to be subject to habitats regulation assessment.
Parry?
Well, Madam, at the moment it doesn't seem likely to be any need for that. I'm not sure that there is any relevant assessment. Obviously, that's a matter the council would have to look into at the same time as we consider whether we need a sustainability assessment.
Any other points? I will work with the council to get a timetable that we can publish. I'll do that through Roz, so that we have some idea of timescales, and we'll make any consultations very specific. Those consultations to do with 5-year housing land supply and the DCLG figures. It is an unusual situation where we have got DCLG figures coming out after we've closed the hearing sessions. As I said, I'll look at the responses. If I need to reopen a session, I will. Might be we can deal with it in writing, but I explained that at the outset. Anything else before we come to closings?
Sorry. On behalf of the working people, I've taken all my annual leave to be here. So if it happens that we have another session, is there any consideration for doing it at any other time, so that if people are working, they are not excluded from attending an EIP? Because the council, I noticed someone's kindly been recording for us, but people have not been able to attend unless they are retired or out of work.
Thank you. Any other points? Councillor Powers.
If this is the last opportunity, Madam, I'd just like to thank you on behalf of all representatives for your forbearance with our idiosyncrasies and everything else, and for giving us all what I think has been a very fair hearing throughout the process. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Powers. Thank you. So I'd like to come now to the closings. Mr. Ashcroft, if you'd like to close on behalf of the council.
Thank you, Madam. I mentioned 2 weeks ago in my opening statement that I was pleased that we had reached the examination phase in the preparation of this plan. I also highlighted that there was a clear recognition that the SAVE development plan was in urgent need of replacement. The hearings that have taken place since the 10th of February have served to reinforce my thinking on this matter as we have addressed the plan and its policies with others. A few comments on the hearings. I concluded my opening statement by indicating that the team and I would use the hearings as a continuation of the constructive debates that we have had on the plan in recent years. I trust you share my view that this has indeed taken place. We have produced additional statements of common ground with others and have sought to respond to your requests for further information and the clarification of policies. Madam, we have worked hard to bring the plan fully up to date and have sought to refine its contents so that it more closely relates to the National Planning Policy Framework and planning policy guidance. Clearly, we've heard a range of views on the plan. Whilst I have not always agreed with those comments, they have served to provide a robust test of the soundness of the plan. I have been pleased that there have been times when it has been appropriate to accept the views of objectors in order to refine and to improve the plan. Madam, it's part of my role and responsibility to extend thanks to various people who've taken place. The hearings have been both stimulating and challenging in equal measure. I would like to extend my thanks to all the participants for the way in which they have presented their various cases. Irrespective of the final outcome of your examination of the plan, the plan is a better document because of this process and the way its various policies have been tested. I would also like to extend my thanks to Mrs. Fallon in her capacity as the programme officer to your examination of the plan. The smooth and efficient running of the hearings owes much to her organisation, patience and ability to deal with a wide range of issues. Thank you. Madam, it's also entirely proper that I offer my own thanks, those of the team and indeed those of all who have taken part, to you for the way in which you have conducted the hearings. And clearly I share the views that have already been expressed. We have been very grateful for your approach, your understanding and your grasp of the range of issues that underpin the plan. It has been a pleasure to have worked with you in this way. And finally, the report that's coming. Plainly, your work has been based around an examination of the soundness of the plan. We trust that you have all the necessary information to draw your own conclusions and were necessary to work with us to identify main modifications in order to secure its soundness. Madam, I finish where I began in submitting to you, and we've already had some discussion around that this morning, that that our future planning function would be best served by the early adoption of this plan. And with this in mind, I look forward to receiving your report in due course. I hope that you've enjoyed your brief spell with us, and I wish you a safe journey home. Thank you.
Yes, it leaves me again to echo Mr. Ashcroft's views and to say thank you all for your participation. I appreciate some of you taking time, Mariette's came and me. Very much appreciate all the contributions to the hearing sessions. Thank you very much to the Council. I know you've worked extremely hard. I appreciate that. And thank you very much to Ross Barnum, who had great deal, as you say, in this move running. Thank you very much. So I'm going to, these sessions are closed. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.